It all started like most things do on Reddit, one throwaway account and an anonymous post that promised a strange, eerie story. But this one was different. It didn't come from the usual "I think I saw a ghost" or "I had a weird experience at a sleepover." No, this one was darker. It was a confession. The post appeared one night in the confession subreddit. The title was simple: "I've done things that will haunt me forever." And the body of the post? A chilling account that turned the typical horror story into something far more disturbing. This wasn't about the supernatural. This was about the darkest corners of the human mind. The confession began innocuously enough. The poster claimed to be someone who had always felt disconnected from people, someone who couldn't seem to feel empathy, despite desperately wanting to. It wasn't that they were cold, but that they felt nothing. No joy. No sadness. Just emptiness. At first, the poster described how they had tried to live a normal life. They went to school, made friends, and even dated a few people. But every relationship felt hollow. There was always a sense of disconnection. They were living a double life, playing a role they didn't understand. Then, it started, an itch that couldn't be scratched. They wanted to understand people's emotions in a way that went beyond just talking to them. They wanted to feel what it was like to make someone feel real pain. The story unfolded slowly, each sentence dripping with a growing sense of dread. "I started small," the poster wrote. "I would do little things to people, just to see how they would react. Spreading rumors, playing mind games, sending anonymous texts to exes. I knew it was wrong, but the thrill was undeniable. When I saw the sadness in their eyes, the confusion, I felt something. It was like a spark that came alive in me for the first time." The poster then recounted a time when things escalated. One evening, they had met a woman named Sarah on one of the dating apps. Sarah was kind, warm, and so full of life that it was almost suffocating. The poster was fascinated by her, but it wasn't out of attraction, it was out of curiosity. They wanted to see if they could break her. They began sending her odd, cryptic messages at odd hours, things that made no sense, things that made Sarah question her own mind. They convinced her to break off contact with all her friends, telling her that they were toxic and that only the poster truly understood her. The woman grew paranoid, slowly losing touch with reality, spiraling into an emotional collapse. All the while, the poster watched from a distance, feeling a cold rush of exhilaration. Eventually, Sarah was found in a park late one night, wandering aimlessly in the freezing cold, talking to herself. She had completely shattered. And the poster, who had been silently observing all of this from behind the scenes, felt triumphant. But something was wrong. "I was disgusted," the confession continued. "Disgusted with myself. I should have felt something, regret, maybe. But I didn't. Instead, all I could think about was how easy it had been. And then I realized I could do it again. And again. And again. It was the perfect game, and no one could stop me." But the poster didn't stop. They kept going. Every person they interacted with, every relationship they formed was nothing but another experiment in control, manipulation, and ultimately destruction. The poster confessed to wrecking careers, relationships, and even lives. But then came the twist. It was at a party, a few months after Sarah had been broken. The poster met someone who was different. He was calm, composed, and seemingly unbreakable. His name was Jason, and he immediately caught the poster's attention. But Jason wasn't like the others. He wasn't easily manipulated. He seemed to see through the poster's facade, almost as though he could read their every move. At first, The poster thought it was a challenge. They tried everything, lying, deceiving, pretending to be someone else. But Jason wouldn't bite. No matter what the poster did, he didn't flinch. And it frustrated them to no end. One night, after an evening of watching Jason from a distance, something changed. The poster was no longer in control. They felt exposed. Jason had known all along. He had been playing the poster. And in that moment, the realization hit them like a ton of bricks. They were just as broken as everyone else they had manipulated. Jason's calm demeanor wasn't an act. He wasn't hiding anything. But the poster? They were a mess, an empty shell pretending to be something they were not. In the final lines of the confession, the poster wrote something chilling. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe because, deep down, I want someone to stop me. Maybe I need someone to show me that I'm human. But I don't think I'll ever change. I can't. The post ended there. The comments flooded in, some with disbelief, some with anger, and others with concern. The usual suspects on Reddit, the ones who loved to speculate about the stories they read, didn't know how to react. Was this just another troll trying to get attention? Was it a real confession? Was this person dangerous? Some tried to offer help. They urged the poster to seek therapy, to acknowledge the depths of their actions and try to change. Others claimed it was a cry for attention, that they were merely looking for validation. But one commenter stood out from the rest. It was a reply from someone who went by the name Jason is here. I know who you are, the comment began. And I know what you've done. It's only a matter of time before it catches up with you. The comment was simple, chilling, and signed with a timestamp. The confession remained on Reddit for only a few hours before it was taken down. But in that short span, it left a lasting impression on everyone who read it. People continued to talk about the post for days, speculating on the identity of the poster, the person named Jason, and what had happened after the confession. Some believed it was just a well-crafted piece of fiction, a story meant to evoke shock and awe. Others couldn't shake the feeling that there was truth behind the words. But the scariest part? The realization that sometimes the most horrifying monsters aren't the ones lurking in the shadows, but the ones who walk among us, pretending to be normal, until, one day, they reveal the truth in a confessional post on Reddit. And as for Jason, no one ever heard from him again. The dark web of deceit, a Reddit confession like no other. It was another late-night scroll through Reddit. The screen flickered in the darkroom as I mindlessly skimmed through posts. But then, something caught my eye, an anonymous post in the confession subreddit. The title was unassuming. I manipulated him into loving me, but now I regret it. As I clicked on it, something about the simplicity of the title seemed off. Usually, these kinds of confessions were loaded with details, filled with the need for validation. But this one felt cold, almost clinical. It was as if the author was saying the words without much care, as though they had already moved on from whatever had happened. The confession began with the typical phrasing, describing a story that could have easily been ignored. The poster, a woman named Lila, admitted that she had always been a bit of a manipulator. She'd never been the type to go out of her way to hurt anyone, but she had always found ways to get what she wanted from people. And it had always worked. At least, it had, until she met Jack. Lila recounted how she met him at a party, how they instantly hit it off. Jack was different, shy, reserved, and, in her eyes, a challenge. But what started as an innocent flirtation soon turned into something darker. She realized she could control him, slowly bending him to her will. She made him feel needed, wanted, even though it wasn't genuine. But it didn't stop there. I got into his head, she wrote. I told him what he wanted to hear. I made him feel like he was the only one who truly understood me, and he bought it. I twisted every word, every action, until he was so emotionally invested in me that he couldn't think straight. At first, it was thrilling. Watching him fall deeper and deeper into her web was like playing a game she had mastered. But then, as the lines blurred and her control over Jack grew stronger, Lila began to see the cracks in the mask she had carefully constructed. Jack became possessive, his need for validation becoming more intense. His once kind and thoughtful nature was replaced with jealousy and suspicion. He stopped seeing his friends, stopped pursuing his passions. Everything revolved around her, and she couldn't stand it. But here was the catch. Lila didn't know how to stop. She realized she had created a monster, but by then, it was too late. I wish I could take it all back, she confessed. I manipulated him until he couldn't breathe without me. But now, he's suffocating, and so am I. The words were haunting, like a confession not meant to be heard. She wanted to fix it, but she didn't know how. Jack was no longer just a person she controlled. He was a reflection of everything she had become. And now, the consequences were catching up with her. But what she didn't expect was the response. After posting her confession, Lila sat in the quiet of her room, waiting for validation or advice, but the reactions were far from what she anticipated. I refreshed the page eagerly, expecting the typical replies, comments urging her to get help or just be honest with him, but the responses were far darker than she could have ever imagined. The first one was from a user with the name TruthSeeker42. It read, "You think you're the only one who's ever done this? You're nothing. I've seen worse. You want to hear about a real manipulation? Because you haven't even scratched the surface of what someone like me can do." At first, Lila hesitated. What kind of reply was that? She scrolled through their profile and saw that the account was relatively new, less than a month old, with only a handful of posts, all on similar confession threads. Each one had the same cryptic, almost taunting tone. The post before hers was a simple one. I made him believe I was the one, and then I destroyed him. Do you want to know how I did it? Curiosity got the best of her. She clicked on the user's profile and scrolled through their history. The comments were unsettling, dark tales of psychological manipulation, emotional destruction, and endless manipulation games. It was like they were bragging, but also seeking validation. There was something chillingly familiar about the way they wrote. Lila typed a quick reply. What do you mean, worse? What have you done? She immediately regretted it, but there was no turning back now. Within seconds, a new message appeared, and her heart raced as she read the chilling response. I'll tell you exactly how it's done. How you push someone to the edge. How you make them feel completely worthless, until they don't even know who they are anymore. It's not about love. It's about control. And when you control someone, you can make them do anything you want. The message was too detailed, too specific. It felt like it was coming from someone who knew exactly how to break a person, how to destroy them from the inside out. The description of manipulation, the fine-tuned psychological games, it all mirrored Lila's own experience with Jack, but with a sense of precision that she had never even considered. In her desperation, she tried to disengage. She had already ruined one life. She didn't want to be part of whatever sick game this person was playing. But as she moved to log out, another message pinged. Don't run away, Lila. You think you're the only one who can play this game? I've been watching you. I've seen what you've done to him. And I know what you're going to do next. Lila froze. How did they know her name? How did they know her plan? She hadn't told anyone about Jack's situation, not even her closest friends. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she reluctantly looked at the screen. It was a message from Jack. I know you're here. I've been looking for you. You're not going to get away with this. Not this time. Jack had never done anything like this BF. The comments section on her Reddit post had grown, but now the messages were all aimed at her. They weren't even words of advice anymore. They were warnings. You're in over your head, Lila. Jack is just the beginning. You've already shown what you're capable of, and you'll keep going until it consumes you. Lila's breathing became shallow as she scrolled through the endless replies. The voices in her head were growing louder, the weight of her actions heavier. She thought she could play this game forever, but now it felt like the walls were closing in. She had made a terrible mistake. Lila rushed to her front door, thinking she needed to leave, to escape from everything before it was too late. But when she opened it, she froze. Standing on her porch was Jack, his face pale, eyes wide, as though he hadn't slept in days. And behind him, the same account name, Truthseeker42, was scrawled on a crumpled piece of paper he held in his hand. Lila felt her heart race as Jack lifted the paper and read aloud, "You've lost control. You will never escape this. It's just beginning." Lila didn't know what to say. Her mouth went dry as she stood there, staring at Jack, at the broken man she had created. Her hands trembled as she reached for the doorframe to steady herself. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had wanted him to love her, to need her, not to fall apart like this. The words Jack read aloud still echoed in her mind. "You've lost control. You will never escape this. It's just beginning." The paper in his hand seemed to glow in the dim light of her porch, as though it was something far more than a mere note. It was a curse. And the worst part? It was true. She had lost control, and now the consequences were coming for her. "Jack," she whispered, voice trembling, I didn't mean for any of this to happen." He looked up at her with haunted eyes. "You didn't mean it? Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you knew exactly what you were doing." His voice was cold, but there was a tremor in it that betrayed the pain he felt. "I thought I was the one in control, Lila. But I see now. You were playing me from the start." Lila took a step back, feeling the air grow heavy around her. Jack's words were like ice, freezing her in place. How could she have been so blind? The manipulation had started so slowly, so subtly. At first, it had felt like a game, one that she could control, one that made her feel powerful. But now, she saw it for what it truly was, a dark spiral, pulling them both down. Jack looked at her with a mix of disbelief and betrayal. "Do you even understand what you've done to me? To us?" His voice cracked. "I've lost everything because of you, my friends, my job, my peace of mind. All because I thought I could be someone you would want." Lila's chest tightened. The guilt she had pushed away for so long crashed over her in waves. She had never meant to destroy him. She had only wanted to feel in control, wanted to fill the emptiness inside her. But now, standing here, looking at the shattered man before her, she realized just how much she had lost as well. The sound of her phone buzzing in her pocket broke the silence. She instinctively pulled it out, hoping for some distraction, some escape from the confrontation. But what she saw made her blood run cold. It was another message from Truthseeker42. "You're not getting away with this. I'll make sure of it." Lila's stomach dropped. The note. The words on the paper. Jack's face. Everything was connected, and she had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went. For the first time, she realized she wasn't the one controlling this game. She was just another pawn, trapped in a web that someone else had spun. Jack noticed her gaze drop to the phone. "Who is that? Who are you talking to?" His voice grew more urgent, and there was a dangerous edge to it now. "Lila, tell me. Is there someone else behind this? Someone you've been talking to, feeding this whole mess?" Lila felt a cold sweat break out on her skin. She tried to focus, but her mind was racing, the walls closing in on her. Truth Seeker 42 had been watching her. Watching both of them. Every move she made, every lie she told, someone had been there, waiting for the moment when everything would fall apart. She had never been in control. She had been a puppet in someone else's twisted game. I don't know what's going on, Jack," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "I swear, I never meant for any of this to happen." Jack took a step toward her, his eyes wild with a mix of rage and fear. "Stop lying to me. I know what you did. You manipulated me. And now you've got someone else pulling your strings." He threw the paper down on the ground, the words still etched into her mind. "But I'm done. Do you hear me, Lila? I'm done." Tears welled in Lila's eyes as she reached out for him, her voice cracking. "Please, Jack, don't leave me. I can fix this. I can make it right." But Jack didn't move. He just stared at her, his face expressionless. And then, as if a switch had flipped, he turned and walked away. Lila stood there in shock, her heart pounding in her chest. She had lost him. Not only had she destroyed his life, but she had pushed him to the point where he could no longer even look at her. It was over. But the message from Truth Seeker 42 kept flashing on her screen, as though mocking her, reminding her that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. "I warned you, Lila. This is far from over." Her breath caught in her throat as she looked around the empty street. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the streetlights above. She was alone. Completely and utterly alone. She sank to her knees, the weight of everything crashing down on her. She had no one left. No one to turn to. She had ruined it all, for nothing. Her phone buzzed again, and this time, it was a link to a video. Without thinking, she clicked on it. The video began with a grainy shot of her own apartment. It was taken from a distance, but it was unmistakably her place. The front door, the windows, the balcony. Lila's heart raced as she watched the footage play out. Then, as the camera zoomed in, the face of Truth Seeker 42 appeared in the frame. But it wasn't just the face she recognized. It was Jack's face, contorted, distorted, as though he had been forced into the video, his eyes wide with terror. "Do you think you can run away from this, Lila?" The voice of Truth Seeker 42 taunted from the background. "You've already lost. And now, Jack belongs to me. Just like you do." The screen went black. Lila's pulse raced as she sat frozen in place, staring at the blank screen. She had never felt so utterly helpless in her life. Whatever game Truth Seeker 42 was playing, it was far more dangerous than anything she could have ever imagined. She had manipulated Jack, but now, it seemed, someone had manipulated her. Her phone buzzed once more. Another message. Another warning. "You've crossed a line, Lila. And now, you'll pay the price." Lila's hands shook as she stared at the last message. "You've crossed a line, Lila. And now, you'll pay the price." The words echoed in her mind like a death knell. What had she gotten herself into? Who was this Truth Seeker 42, and how were they connected to Jack? The video, with Jack's face twisted in terror, made her blood run cold. Was he involved in all of this, or was he another victim, just like her? Her phone buzzed again, but this time, it wasn't a text. It was a call. The name on the screen made her stomach turn, Jack. She hesitated, staring at the screen, her finger hovering over the decline button. She wanted to answer, to apologize, to explain everything. But what could she possibly say to make it right? What could she say to someone she had pushed so far into darkness? With a deep breath, she pressed the green button and brought the phone to her ear. "Jack," she whispered, her voice shaking. The line was silent for a moment, then the voice that came through wasn't Jack's. It was the same cold, mocking voice from the video. "You shouldn't have answered, Lila." Her heart slammed in her chest. "What do you want?" she demanded, trying to mask the fear creeping into her voice. "I want you to understand what you've done," Truth Seeker 42 said, the words dripping with venom. "You played a dangerous game, Lila. You thought you could control someone. But you're not in control now. And neither is Jack." Lila's mind raced. "What do you mean? What have you done to him?" Her breath caught in her throat as the possibility of something far worse than she had imagined began to take root. "He's mine now," the voice said casually, as if it didn't matter at all. "And if you want to see him again, you'll do exactly what I say." A chill ran down Lila's spine. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to confess everything, Lila. Not just to me, but to the world. You will tell them all what you did to Jack. You will make them understand the kind of person you really are." Lila's breath quickened. I can't do that. I can't." "Oh, but you will," the voice cut her off, almost amused. "Because if you don't, I'll make sure that Jack never sees the light of day again. You'll be responsible for his fate." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. No, please," she begged. "I never meant for any of this. I didn't mean to ruin his life. I swear, I never wanted to hurt him." The voice on the other end of the line didn't soften. "You should have thought of that before you started playing games, Lila. Now, you'll have to deal with the consequences." The line went dead, leaving Lila with the deafening silence of her own thoughts. She sat there in the dark, phone still pressed to her ear, her heart racing, panic rising within her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Jack, about the mess she had made of his life. And now, Truth Seeker 42 was holding all the cards. The next few days were a blur. Lila barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jack's face twisted in fear, his eyes wide and full of betrayal. And behind that, the cold, calculating figure of Truth Seeker 42 loomed over her, their control tightening like a noose around her neck. She thought about going to the police. But what would she even tell them? That some anonymous person on Reddit was blackmailing her? That she had ruined someone's life and now they were being held hostage by an invisible enemy? She couldn't risk it. If she went to the authorities, Truth Seeker 42 would make sure she paid for it, and Jack would be the one who suffered. The only option left was to obey. She had no choice. She spent hours crafting a confession. She wrote about everything, about Jack, about the manipulation, about how she had twisted him into the perfect puppet. She described in painstaking detail how she had made him think he was the one for her, how she had torn him apart, bit by bit, until he couldn't recognize himself anymore. But she didn't stop there. She had to go further. Truth Seeker 42 wanted her to confess everything. So, she included the truth about herself, the darkness inside her, the emptiness she had always felt, the desperation that drove her to play games with people's hearts. It wasn't just about Jack. It was about her. When she finished, she didn't feel relieved. She felt sick. The weight of the words on the page was unbearable. She had poured out everything she had hidden from herself, and now there was no turning back. The next step was to post it, on Reddit, of course. The place where it had all started. She hesitated before hitting the submit button, but she knew there was no choice. If she didn't, she'd lose Jack forever. Just as her finger hovered over the keyboard, the phone rang again. It was Jack. This time, she didn't hesitate. She picked up immediately. "Jack," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Lila," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "You don't have to do this. You don't have to give them what they want." Her heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about? You don't understand." I understand more than you think," Jack interrupted. "I've been trying to make sense of all this, trying to understand why you did what you did. But I've realized something." His voice trembled with something close to pain. "You weren't the only one playing games, Lila. I was too. I let you control me. I let myself fall into the trap you set for me." He paused, and she could hear him breathing heavily on the other end. "But I'm done with that. I'm done with all of it." Lila's chest tightened as she fought to keep the tears back. "Jack, please, I'm sorry. I never meant to." "I know you didn't mean to," Jack said softly, "but that doesn't change what you did. And it doesn't change what Truth Seeker 42 wants. They're using us both, Lila." The realization hit her like a lightning bolt. Truth Seeker 42 wasn't just using her to get to Jack. They were using both of them, playing them against each other, pushing them to destroy themselves. It was all a game. "I'm not going to let them win," Jack continued, his voice now firm. "We have to stop playing their game. We have to take back control." Lila felt a flicker of hope, something she hadn't felt in weeks. Maybe they could fight back. Maybe they could escape the grasp of Truth Seeker 42. But first, they had to find out who they were, and why they were so determined to tear them apart. "Jack," Lila said, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do we stop them?" The Phantom in the Shadows, a Reddit confession. It all started with an innocuous post. Just another one in a sea of confessions, written by someone hiding behind a throwaway account, trying to offload the weight of their darkest secret. At first, it looked like the typical Reddit confession, vague, cryptic, asking for advice or sympathy. But something about it caught my attention. The title was simple, yet it felt different. "I think I saw something I shouldn't have. Now it's watching me." It seemed like a typical "I think I'm being haunted" post, but as I read the words that followed, I realized this was something far darker than mere ghost stories. The poster, who went by the username Shadow Seeker, claimed that they had seen something on their nightly walks, a shadow, moving unnaturally fast, always just on the edge of their vision. At first, they thought it was just fatigue, or maybe their mind playing tricks on them. But then it started to happen more frequently. The shadow seemed to follow them, never quite close enough to get a good look, but always there. And then, one night, it stopped following them. That's when things started to get weird. "I thought I was losing my mind," the post read. "But I'm telling you, I saw it. The shadow didn't stop following me. It just started waiting." The post went on to describe how the shadow began to appear in places it shouldn't have been, watching from the windows, standing at the edge of the street when the poster walked home. At first, it felt like a strange coincidence, maybe just the product of an overactive imagination. But then things took a darker turn. I woke up to find something on my doorstep, the post continued. A piece of paper, with just 2 words written on it, "I see you." The feeling of dread that followed was palpable, even through the screen. The poster had no idea who left the note, but their every instinct screamed that it was connected to the shadow. Something was wrong, and they were being watched. The next few days became a blur of unease. The poster couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight, that they were never truly alone. But then came the real turning point, the moment that made the story stand out in a sea of similar confessions. I woke up last night to the sound of whispering, the post read. It was soft at first, like the wind. But then I heard it clearly, my name, whispered over and over again. Name, I'm here. The chilling part wasn't just the whispering, it was the realization that the voice sounded too familiar. Too human. I know what you're thinking, the poster wrote. You probably think I'm crazy. But I swear, I'm not. I've seen the shadow. I've heard the whispers. And I don't know what's worse, the fact that it's following me, or the fact that I've started to feel comfortable with it. There was something terrifying about that last line, the idea that the poster had begun to accept whatever was happening to them. It wasn't just a haunting anymore, it was a slow, creeping invasion into their very mind. They weren't just being followed. They were being drawn in. The comments on the post were split. Some were sympathetic, telling the poster to get help. Others shared their own creepy experiences of seeing strange figures or hearing whispers in the dark. But there was one comment that stood out above the rest. It came from a user with the name Watcher of Shadows. You think it's watching you now? Watcher of Shadows wrote. You haven't seen the worst of it. It doesn't just follow you. It learns from you. The message gave Lila, the poster, a chill. Watcher of Shadows seemed to know things they hadn't shared in the post, things that felt far too personal. And then came the final line. It's waiting for you to make a mistake. And when you do, it will take everything. Lila's heart skipped a beat. She felt like the air around her had thickened. How did this stranger know so much about her situation? Who's Watcher of Shadows, and why did their words feel so final? Days passed, and the poster's posts grew more frantic. The shadow was no longer just a figure, it had become a presence. Lila described how it seemed to watch her from every corner of her house, from every reflection in the glass. It had become a part of her life. And then, the worst thing happened. I saw it again tonight, the post read. But this time, it was different. It spoke to me. Not in whispers, but in words. Clear, unmistakable words. I know you. Lila wasn't sure if she was imagining it. The reality of the situation had blurred to the point where she couldn't tell what was real anymore. But the shadow was more present than ever. It was no longer a mere observer, it was an active participant in her life. And it knew her name. It knew everything. Then, just as suddenly as the posts had started, they stopped. The subreddit was filled with messages, asking if Lila was okay, wondering where she had gone. But no reply came. It was as if she had disappeared off the face of the earth, like the shadow had taken her with it. A week later, another post appeared, this time from a different user with the name Silent Wanderer. The message was short but ominous. I was walking near the park last night, and I saw her. Lila. She was standing at the edge of the woods, staring into the darkness. And then, as if she knew I was watching, she turned around, smiled, and whispered, It's coming for you next. The post ended there, and nothing more was ever heard from Silent Wanderer. The mystery of the shadow remained unsolved. Some speculated that Lila had gone mad, that the shadow had driven her to the brink of insanity. Others believed she was the victim of some kind of supernatural force, something far darker than any of them could comprehend. And then there were those who believed, like Watcher of Shadows had warned, that the shadow had learned from her, and that the nightmare would continue, following whoever would make the mistake of becoming too curious. But one thing was certain, whatever was out there, lurking in the darkness, was waiting. And it wasn't done yet. 2 weeks passed. The Reddit post that had started the whole ordeal was now buried beneath a sea of other confessions. But every time Lila's name was mentioned, the stories began to take on a life of their own, spreading like wildfire. Some believed she had fallen victim to a dark force, others thought it was all a hoax, but there were a few who were obsessed with finding out the truth. And somewhere among those users was someone who seemed to know far too much. The account Watcher of Shadows had disappeared shortly after posting their cryptic warnings. But that didn't stop them from leaving behind clues. At first, it was subtle, little comments here and there on other posts, hidden inside discussions about urban legends or unexplained phenomena. But as time passed, their presence became impossible to ignore. One day, on a random post about a haunted house, a new message appeared from Watcher of Shadows. But this time, it wasn't just a warning. It was a clue. It's closer than you think. You want to find Lila? Start at the abandoned warehouse on Elm Street. But be warned, the shadows there are different. They're waiting. The message sent a ripple through the Reddit community. Who was this person? How did they know about the warehouse? And more importantly, what did they mean by the shadows are different? The speculation was wild. Some believed it was all part of a larger game. Others thought it was someone who had been tracking Lila's every move, using her confession as a twisted way to lure in others. But one user, Darkscribe, was different. He wasn't interested in theories. He was interested in action. Darkscribe immediately set out to investigate. He knew that if anyone could uncover the truth, it was him. For years, he had been following the oddest of mysteries, stories that didn't add up, strange disappearances, and things that went bump in the night. And now, he had a lead that felt all too real. He posted an update on Reddit, detailing his plans. I'm going to the warehouse on Elm Street. I'll live stream it. If you want answers, come with me. Within hours, the comments exploded with both support and warnings. Some users were intrigued, while others begged him not to go. But Darkscribe was determined. The truth, whatever it was, had to be uncovered. That night, he set up his camera and walked towards the abandoned warehouse. The air was thick with the feeling of anticipation, the darkness stretching out before him like an ominous warning. The warehouse loomed ahead, its broken windows like hollow eyes watching him approach. As he stepped inside, the temperature seemed to drop. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. But what caught his attention wasn't the eeriness of the place, it was the whispering. Soft at first, like the wind rustling through the cracks in the walls. But then it became clearer. You shouldn't have come, a voice murmured from the shadows. Darkscribe froze. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he slowly turned towards the sound. His flashlight flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. For a moment, everything seemed to be still. But then, it appeared. A figure, cloaked in darkness, emerged from the corner of the room. It was tall, impossibly tall, with long, spindly limbs that seemed to stretch beyond the normal boundaries of human movement. Its face was obscured by a hood, but the empty, Hollow eyes seemed to pierce right through him. Do you know what you've uncovered? The figure's voice was deep, almost reverberating through the walls. Darkscribe couldn't move. His breath caught in his throat as the figure stepped closer, its presence suffocating. And then, before he could even react, a second figure emerged from the shadows, this one smaller, more delicate, but equally unnerving. Lila. Or someone who looked like her. Her eyes were wide, glazed over, as though she was no longer fully there. Her mouth curled into a smile that wasn't quite right. You shouldn't have come, Lila repeated, but her voice was cold, distant. Darkscribe backed away, heart pounding in his chest. He knew he had stumbled onto something far worse than he could have imagined. Whatever was happening here, whatever had happened to Lila, it wasn't just a ghost. It was something much darker, something that had the power to twist people's very souls. He turned to flee, but the doors slammed shut with a deafening bang. The shadows seemed to grow, closing in around him, as if they were alive, feeding on his fear. The whispering grew louder, more frantic, until it was all-consuming. You've opened the door, the voice echoed from every direction. Now you will join us. The camera feed went black. A few days later, Reddit was flooded with messages, but this time they weren't from Darkscribe. They were from someone else. Someone who had been watching the live stream. The message was short, simple, and chilling. I told you. The shadows are waiting. And with that, the Reddit thread vanished.